Hello students! I wanted to take a chance this week to address some things about false memory. You've read some things for the online discussion board as well as for the online class meeting about Elizabeth Loftus's research in false memory. So I wanted to review really quick what she said about it and talk about some things that I think are some compelling evidence against the implications and results that she claims. So Dr. Loftus does experiments like the mall experiment, where she will have a child come into the lab and the experimenter, a parent, or a sibling will read two true stories that comes from the child's past, like from journals or something like that, and then a false story about that child being lost in the mall. And she has a lot of results that say soon after talking about these stories, that child will remember, oh yes, and they will say, oh yes, I did get lost in the mall, I remember I was scared. And so they use those kind of results from these different memory experiments. And there's a lot more than I'm not able to talk about with this short message that I'm giving today. But the basic idea is that by suggesting things to children or adults, you can implant a false memory. So a therapist, like in that paper you read, might be suggesting to a patient that they might have been sexually abused, and over time that implants a false memory that that person was actually sexually abused. So some different memory researchers have some different problems with that. So one researcher that I learned from in graduate school is Dr. Pezdek, and her research is also in cognitive psychology, memory, and also statistics. So one big thing in the field of memory is that memory works in large part by constructing memories from similar pieces. So you don't actually have like a videotape in your head that plays the exact memory. You kind of construct it from the feelings, from similar events, from the images that you have in your head, kind of like that. And you've read about that this week, so I won't go into that. But Dr. Pezdek's idea was that only plausible situations would be likely to create a false memory. So something like getting lost in a mall is a plausible situation. A lot of people, as they're young, do get lost from parents, whether it's in a mall or in a store or at a park. And also we hear a lot of stories about children getting lost. There's even fairy tales about children being lost. So we have already made a schema about getting lost, what it's like, what you might feel, how it might happen. So that is a plausible situation. You have an idea of how that might go. So Dr. Pezdek's saying that kind of memory would be easy to suggest or make a false memory because you've already got some of the framework for it. But that she says Loftus's results are likely because of that, because getting lost in a mall is a plausible idea. So Dr. Pezdek thought, well, you could probably make a plausible false memory, but not an implausible one, like childhood sexual abuse. Like, that's not as plausible of a thing. It's not something that happens as commonly, so it's not something you would have a framework in your head as a child or as a teenager or as an adult. That wouldn't be such a common thing that you would have a schema for already. So she went and she tested this with two different experiments. So in experiment one, the first part of it was that she took people who were Catholic and Jewish, and she read them three true events from their past and also two false events. So the three true events came from journals and things from parents and siblings, and the two false events were things, in the case on the left, they never used the words like Catholic or Jewish, but they described a First Communion experience without saying it like this is a Catholic thing or using the word communion. They described a First Communion where a child might be nervous about it, where it could be embarrassing, where it can be a big deal for families. And for the Jewish ritual, they talked about, and I might get this name wrong, it's Shabbat, but that's a similar, fairly similar Jewish ritual surrounding food and the lighting of candles. And it's also something that a child could be nervous of with their first time if they're playing a role in it. So they took both these groups, the Jewish and Catholic people, and they told them all the same false events. So they had 3 true events from their own life, and then they both heard about the Catholic ritual and about the Jewish ritual without those names, like Jewish ritual or Catholic. And the results of that were really interesting. And here are the results. So you can see those Catholic participants, 9 of them, after 1 week later, 9 of those participants who were Catholic said, I do remember that ritual. I remember this happened, and they added to the story above and beyond what they had been told by the experimenters. But only 3 of them remembered the Jewish ritual, because that schema wasn't there. They didn't have a framework for that kind of ritual because they had never experienced it. And similarly, the Jewish participants, they remembered this Jewish ritual. That had never actually happened, because, I mean, they changed the story. It wasn't exactly those rituals, but it was very similar. So the Jewish participants, they remembered that fake Jewish ritual, but none of them remembered the fake Catholic ritual. So that suggests that maybe it does have a lot to do with plausibility. It would be plausible to have those kinds of rituals for a Catholic person, but not for a Jewish person. So they went even a step further in this study, and down here you can see the citation. If you want to read the full article, it's a really good one. So the second experiment took that same plausible idea of the mall with a relatively implausible idea of a child having a rectal enema for constipation when they were younger. And that was chosen because having a rectal enema is very similar in a lot of ways to sexual abuse. It's kind of shameful, it's embarrassing, it involves discomfort in the areas of the body that are associated with sexual abuse. So a lot of similarities between a rectal enema and sexual abuse. But it's not as common of a thing. It's common enough that it could have happened, but it's not so uncommon that nobody would have any kind of idea of what that was. So the plausible event, again, was the mall. An implausible event is a rectal enema. So what they found in 20 different participants, and again, they, let me read really quick. So in this case, they were told 1 true event from their life, and all participants were told both false events. And so in these cases, in these 20 cases, people only remembered, a week after, people only remembered the false mall event. Nobody remembered the enema event. And that goes a lot further to suggest that the plausibility of an event has a lot to do with how it will be remembered, how a false memory might be remembered or created. Alright, so there are those are 2 good studies that were from one paper, and she did another paper where she used that same plausible and implausible study or scenarios in different age children. So there were younger children aged 5 through 7 and older children aged 9 through 12. And so they did the same kind of thing. They were read 1 true event from their own lives and 2 false events, the plausible and the implausible event. So again, the getting lost in the mall when you were with your mom when you were young, or when you were young you ate a lot of candy and you got constipated and your mom had to give you a rectal enema for that constipation. So these results also showed the same pattern as the ones before in the other studies. Of the younger children, 10 remembered the false mall event, that they thought they remembered getting lost in the mall, but only 3 of them remembered ever having a rectal enema. And in the older children, 9 to 12, 7 of them remembered going to the mall and getting lost. And again, this test to see if they remembered was done a week after they were read the stories, and then they also had to add to the stories, like not just repeat back what the experimenter had said, but add something to it to show that they had constructed a memory around that. So in the older children, 7 of them remembered the mall event, and none of them remembered the rectal enema. So that goes further to show that this plausibility is a serious and significant variable in being able to implant a false memory, or create or develop a false memory. So we have Elizabeth Loftus's implications that a kind of mall scenario might be relatable to sexual abuse. That since children can remember a false memory from getting lost in the mall, they could be suggestible enough to remember sexual abuse. But this rectal enema example, which is very similar in a lot of ways to child sexual abuse, was not remembered nearly as well. Like in these studies, there were only 3 that remembered that event. So, the implications of Dr. Pezdek's research is that plausible false memories are more easy to create than implausible ones. And so while it is possible that someone who's impressionable, like an adult in a therapy situation, might be impressionable and have a bad therapist, they could create false memories of child abuse, it's unlikely. And so it's unlikely, an implication of Dr. Pezdek's research is that it is unlikely that someone would develop or create a false memory of sexual abuse, because that schema is not there. It's not a plausible event unless similar things have happened to that person as a child. So to have that memory be created, that false memory be created, it would have had to have been a plausible scenario. In other words, sexual abuse may have actually happened in that child's home, or similar events that were construed as sexual abuse and constructed around other things. So again, Dr. Loftus's implications say, well, if you can implant a false memory of the mall, you can implant a false memory of child sexual abuse. But Dr. Pezdek's research really pushes back on that and says, no, it's not that easy. You can only really create false memories of things that are plausible, that you have a schema for, things that have happened. So I wanted to give you guys that pushback because I don't think that the other material that you covered this week did a good job at showing the different sides of that story. And I definitely think Dr. Pezdek's research is very compelling evidence to say that that plausibility is a big factor in it. So I definitely wanted to share that with you. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I know it's a little additional than what we usually have in the week, but I thought it was really important to get these ideas to you so that you didn't go away from it thinking that memories were so easily implanted in people. So thank you very much.